The iron gates of Thornveil Manor loomed before Natalie Everton like the jaws of some ancient beast, and she had exactly 30 seconds to decide whether walking through them would save her life or end it. Rain poured down in sheets, soaking through her thin jacket and turning her carefully packed resume into pulp inside her messenger bag. The bus that had dropped her at the wrong stop was long gone, its taillights disappearing into the storm like dying embers. Her phone had died an hour ago, and the address scrawled on the crumpled paper in her pocket had led her here, to this impossibly grand estate that seemed to have materialized out of the darkness itself. She'd been running for 3 days straight, ever since her ex-boyfriend Marcus had shown up at her apartment with that look in his eyes, the one that said he'd finally crossed the line from obsessive to dangerous. The restraining order hadn't stopped him. The police couldn't help her. She needed to disappear, and the live-in governess position she'd found online had seemed like a gift from the universe. Except this couldn't possibly be the right place. The manor stretched toward the sky like a cathedral, all Gothic spires and dark stone that seemed to drink in the moonlight rather than reflect it. Windows glowed with warm amber light, dozens of them, suggesting a household far larger than any family needing a simple governess. Through the rain, she could make out manicured gardens, marble fountains, and what looked like actual gargoyles perched along the roofline. She should turn back, find a motel, regroup, check the address again in the morning. But then she heard the sound of a car engine behind her, moving slowly, deliberately. Her blood turned to ice. She spun around and saw headlights cutting through the rain, approaching at a crawl. Marcus. It had to be. He'd found her somehow, tracked her phone before it died, or followed the bus route, or Natalie didn't think. She ran toward the gates, pressing the call button on the stone pillar beside them. Once, twice, 3 times, her finger jabbing frantically while her heart hammered against her ribs. "Please," she whispered. "Please, please, please." The intercom crackled to life. Identification. The voice was female, clipped, efficient. I'm here for the position, the governess position. I know I'm early, I'm so sorry, but please." The car was closer now. She could see it through the bars of the gate, a dark sedan with tinted windows. The same model Marcus drove. "Please," her voice cracked. "I need to, someone's following me. Please let me in." For a moment there was only silence and the drumming of rain on iron. Then, mercifully, the gates began to swing open with a low groan that sounded almost alive. Natalie didn't wait for them to open fully. She squeezed through the gap and ran up the gravel drive, her shoes splashing through puddles, her lungs burning. She didn't look back until she reached the massive front doors, carved from dark wood and fitted with brass handles shaped like snarling wolves. The doors opened before she could knock. A woman stood in the entrance, tall and impossibly elegant, dressed in a severe black dress that looked like it cost more than Natalie's entire wardrobe. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her eyes, pale gray, almost colorless, studied Natalie with an expression that hovered between disapproval and curiosity. "You're soaking wet," the woman observed. "I'm sorry. The bus, I walked from—" Natalie's words tangled together. Now that she was here, standing in the golden light spilling from the entrance hall, the full absurdity of her situation crashed over her. "I think there might be a mistake. The address I have, it's for a governess position, but this place is— I don't think you're here for the children." It wasn't a question. The woman's gaze traveled over Natalie, assessing. "You're younger than I expected." "I'm 23, Natalie said quickly, "but I have experience. I worked at a private academy for 2 years, and before that I was a nanny for the Henderson family and— Come inside before you catch your death." The woman stepped back, gesturing Natalie into the entrance hall. Natalie hesitated for only a heartbeat before crossing the threshold. The moment she did, warmth enveloped her, along with the scent of old books, beeswax candles, and something else, something faintly metallic that she couldn't quite place. The entrance hall was enormous, with a ceiling that soared 3 stories high. A grand staircase swept upward, splitting into 2 curving arms that led to shadowed hallways. Portraits lined the walls, dozens of them, all depicting pale, beautiful people with an otherworldly quality that made Natalie's skin prickle. "I am Mrs. Kovar," the woman said, closing the doors with a heavy thud that made Natalie jump. "I manage the household. You'll report directly to me regarding the children's daily schedules and needs. However, her pale eyes grew sharper. His Majesty will want to approve your appointment personally. His Majesty? King Dravimir Cassius Thornveil, Mrs. Kovar said, as if the name should mean something. When Natalie's expression remained blank, the woman's lips pressed into a thin line. You didn't research your employer before accepting the position? There wasn't much information in the posting. It just said a private household, live-in position, generous salary. Natalie stopped, realization dawning. Wait, king? Is this some kind of, are you people like historical reenactors or something? For the first time, something that might have been amusement flickered across Mrs. Kovar's face. Or something, she murmured. Follow me. His Majesty is in the study. If he approves, you'll begin immediately. The children have been difficult lately. Natalie wanted to ask what that meant, wanted to demand more information about what exactly she was walking into, but her options were limited. Outside, Marcus might still be circling. She had nowhere else to go, no money for a hotel, and her phone was dead. At least here, behind these walls and gates, she was safe for the moment. She followed Mrs. Kovar through a maze of corridors, each more opulent than the last, silk wallpaper in deep burgundy and gold, antique furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, more portraits of those strange, beautiful, pale people. Candelabras held real candles, their flames casting dancing shadows. Despite the obvious wealth on display, there was something distinctly old-fashioned about the place, as if electricity was a reluctant concession to modernity. They stopped before a set of double doors. Mrs. Kovar knocked twice, then opened them without waiting for a response. Your Majesty, the new governess has arrived. The study was exactly what Natalie would have imagined for a man who called himself a king. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined every wall, packed with leather-bound volumes. A fireplace large enough to stand in crackled with flames. Heavy curtains blocked out the night. And behind an enormous desk carved from black wood sat a man who made every nerve in Natalie's body suddenly alert in a way that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with something far more dangerous. He was beautiful. Devastatingly so. The kind of beautiful that didn't exist in the real world, that belonged in paintings or fever dreams. His hair fell to his shoulders, white as fresh snow, contrasting sharply with his pale skin. His features were aristocratic, almost severe high cheekbones, a strong jaw, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. They were red. Not brown with a reddish tint, not hazel in certain light. Red, like rubies, like blood, like nothing human. He looked up from the document he'd been reading, and those impossible eyes fixed on Natalie with an intensity that made her feel pinned in place. Majesty, Mrs. Kovar said, this is... She paused. Forgive me, I didn't get your name. Natalie. Natalie Everton. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Dravimir rose from his chair, and Natalie had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. He was easily 6.5 feet tall, dressed in clothes that managed to be both modern and timeless black trousers, a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. He moved with a predator's grace as he circled the desk, each step deliberate, controlled. You're not what I expected, he said. His voice was deep, touched with an accent she couldn't place something old European, refined. When did the agency say you would arrive? Tomorrow morning, Mrs. Kovar answered. She's early. I can explain, Natalie said quickly. I had some personal issues. I thought getting here ahead of schedule would be better than someone was following you. It wasn't a question. Dravimir's red eyes narrowed slightly. I heard you at the gate. My ex-boyfriend. He's been he won't accept that it's over. I have a restraining order, but he keeps finding me. I needed to disappear for a while, and this job seemed perfect. Remote location, live-in position, and I'm good with kids, I promise. I know this is irregular, but you're running. Dravimir took another step closer. Natalie could smell him now, something like cedar and smoke, with that same metallic undertone she'd noticed in the entrance hall. You're desperate, and you came here seeking sanctuary. Put like that, it sounded pathetic. Natalie lifted her chin. I came here for a job. If you don't want to hire me, I'll leave. But I'd appreciate the chance to at least show you my qualifications before you... No. Her heart sank. No, you won't leave. Dravimir's gaze held hers, and there was something almost hypnotic about those red eyes. If someone is hunting you, you'll be safe within these walls, safer than you can imagine. As for the position, he glanced at Mrs. Kovar. What do you think? The older woman studied Natalie again, more carefully this time. She's young, but she doesn't frighten easily. That will be important. And the children might respond better to someone closer to their age, relatively speaking. How old are the children? Natalie asked. The posting didn't specify. 8 and 10, Mrs. Kovar said. A girl and a boy. They've proven challenging for previous governesses. How many previous governesses? Dravimir's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You would be the 7th in 3 months. Oh, Natalie swallowed. What happened to the others? They quit. Mrs. Kovar's tone suggested that was putting it mildly. The children have rather particular needs, and not everyone is equipped to handle them. This was insane. Everything about this situation screamed danger. The isolated location, the mysterious employer who called himself a king, the rapid turnover of staff, those impossible red eyes. But where else could she go? Marcus knew her friends, her family, all her usual haunts. He'd proven he could find her anywhere in the city. At least here, behind these walls, she'd have time to figure out her next move. And the money. God, she needed the money. The salary listed in the posting had been almost too good to be true. I can handle difficult children, she said. When do I start? Dravimir exchanged a long look with Mrs. Kovar, some silent communication passing between them. Then he turned back to Natalie. Immediately, Mrs. Kovar will show you to your quarters and explain the household rules. Tomorrow, you'll meet the children. But understand, Miss Everton. His voice dropped lower, taking on an edge that raised goosebumps on her arms. This household is not like others. There are rules that must be followed without exception. Break them, and you will be dismissed immediately, regardless of what dangers await you outside these gates. Is that clear? Crystal clear. Good. He moved back to his desk, dismissing her with the gesture. But just as Mrs. Kovar turned to leave, he spoke again. And Miss Everton? Welcome to Thornveil Manor. I do hope you'll last longer than your predecessors. The way he said it made it sound less like a hope and more like a challenge. Mrs. Kovar led her through more corridors, up a narrow servant staircase, and finally to a small but surprisingly comfortable room in what Natalie guessed was the manor's east wing. A bed with a thick duvet, a wardrobe, a desk, and a window with heavy curtains. Simple, but infinitely better than the cramped studio apartment she'd fled. The rules, Mrs. Kovar said, standing in the doorway. First and most important, you are never, under any circumstances, to go outside after dark without explicit permission from His Majesty or myself. Never. Do you understand? Why? Because those are the rules. Mrs. Kovar's voice was iron. Second, the children are to be in bed with their curtains drawn before sunrise, not at sunrise, before. Third, if you see any of the family with guests in the formal dining room, you are to turn around and leave immediately. You do not interrupt, you do not ask questions. Fourth, you will notice that meals are prepared separately for family and staff. You eat in the kitchen with the other household members. You do not ask for food from the family's table. Natalie's unease was growing with each rule. Is this some kind of religious thing? Mrs. Kovar's pale eyes studied her for a long moment. In a manner of speaking, she finally said, there will be a uniform in the wardrobe. Wear it at all times when you're with the children. Breakfast is at 7. I'll introduce you to the rest of the staff then, and you'll meet the children at 9. Do not be late. Wait, what are the children's names? Serafina and Lucian. Mrs. Kovar paused at the threshold. They're good children, Miss Everton, despite their challenges. But they've been through a great deal. Their mother died 5 years ago, and they've been raised in a very particular way. They're testing you, all of you. Every governess who walks through that door is a potential threat or a potential ally. Show them you're the latter and you'll do fine. With that cryptic advice, she left, closing the door behind her. Natalie sat on the bed, her wet clothes clinging to her skin, and tried to process everything. A king. Rules about not going outside after dark, about curtains drawn before sunrise, that metallic smell, those red eyes, the strange, old-world formality of it all. She should be terrified, part of her was. But another part, the part that had survived her mother's death when she was 16, that had put herself through college while working 3 jobs, that had finally gotten the courage to leave Marcus after months of escalating control, that part was intrigued. Whatever was happening here, whatever strange game these people were playing with their titles and their rules, at least it was interesting, at least it was safe, and at least for the first time in months, Marcus couldn't reach her. She got up, peeled off her wet clothes, and found a bathroom down the hall with hot water and soft towels. By the time she crawled into bed, her body was exhausted, but her mind was still racing. Through the window, she could see the grounds of the estate stretching into darkness, and somewhere in that darkness, the gates that separated her from the world outside. Tomorrow she would meet the children. Tomorrow she would start to understand what this place really was. Tonight, she slept better than she had in months. The screaming started at 8:47 a.m. Natalie had been waiting in the nursery, though. Calling it a nursery seemed absurd given its size for nearly 15 minutes, getting more nervous with each passing second. The room was enormous, with toys that looked antique and expensive, books in multiple languages, and furniture that seemed designed for royalty rather than children. Mrs. Cover had left her there with instructions to make herself known to the children, and disappeared. Now, the sound of a child's furious shrieking echoed through the hallways, growing closer. Natalie stood up from the chair she'd been perched on, smoothing down the gray dress that was apparently her uniform. It fit perfectly, which was strange since no one had asked her size, but she'd learned not to question the oddities of this place. The door burst open. A little girl stormed in, all wild dark curls and flashing eyes, being half carried by Mrs. Cover. Despite her violent thrashing, she couldn't have been more than 8, small for her age, dressed in a velvet dress that looked like something from a historical drama, and she was biting. Actually biting Mrs. Cover's arm while kicking at her shins. I won't, I hate her, I hate them all, they always leave. Serafina, that's enough. Mrs. Cover's voice remained calm despite the child literally attacking her. She set the girl down, and Serafina immediately tried to bolt back through the door. Mrs. Cover caught her by the back of her dress. Your brother is on his way. You will behave like the princess you are. I'm not a princess. I'm a... Serafina's eyes landed on Natalie for the first time, and she froze. Her mouth snapped shut, and Natalie saw her properly now. Pale skin, very pale, like her father's. And when the morning light from the window caught her at just the right angle, there was something almost translucent about her. But her eyes were different from Dravimir's. They were dark, almost black, though Natalie could have sworn she saw a flicker of red deep within them. Hello, Natalie said quietly. I'm Natalie. Serafina stared at her, breathing hard, her small hands clenched into fists. You're the new one. I am. You'll leave too. They all leave. Maybe, Natalie said honestly, or maybe I'll stay. I guess we'll find out together. That seemed to surprise the girl. She tilted her head, studying Natalie with an intensity that was unnerving in someone so young. You're not afraid of me. Should I be? Yes, Serafina said flatly. I bit the last governess. She bled everywhere. Mrs. Cover cleared her throat. That incident was... I'm very sorry to hear that, Natalie interrupted, keeping her eyes on Serafina. Did she deserve it? Another pause. Serafina's eyes widened slightly. She pulled my hair. She said I was being a spoiled brat and I needed to learn discipline. Then she probably deserved it, Natalie said. But maybe next time, try words before teeth. Words can hurt just as much, and you don't get in as much trouble. A ghost of a smile flickered across Serafina's face before she could stop it. Then the door opened again, and a boy walked in. Lucian was clearly the older sibling. 10, maybe 11 if he was small for his age. He had the same pale skin as his sister, the same white hair as their father, though his was shorter, messier. His eyes were that same impossible red, and unlike Serafina's wild energy, he carried himself with careful control. He walked to his sister's side and put a protective hand on her shoulder. It's all right, Sarah, he said quietly. His voice was mature for his age, thoughtful. Let's give her a chance. They all leave, Serafina repeated, but with less venom this time. Then we'll make sure this one wants to stay. Lucian's red eyes met Natalie's, and there was something ancient in that gaze, something that didn't belong in a child's face. You're different from the others. How so? You're not here because you love children or because you want to serve a noble household. His head tilted, eerily similar to his sister's gesture. You're running from something. I can smell your fear, not of us, of something else. The hair on the back of Natalie's neck stood up. That's very perceptive. We're not normal children, Lucian said simply. You've probably figured that out by now. Mrs. Kovar stepped forward. That's quite enough, Master Lucian. Miss Everton, the children have lessons until noon, literature, mathematics, history, and music. After lunch, they have free time, which you'll supervise. Dinner is at 7 sharp, and they must be in their rooms by 8. Their curtains must be drawn before sunrise, Natalie finished. I remember? Good. Mrs. Kovar moved toward the door. I'll leave you to get acquainted. Children, please try not to make Miss Everton quit before lunch. The moment she was gone, Serafina pulled away from her brother and crossed to one of the windows. The heavy curtains were drawn back, letting in pale morning light. She stood just at the edge of the sunbeam, as if testing something. Sarah, don't, Lucian started. But Serafina thrust her hand into the direct sunlight. Natalie gasped, expecting what? She didn't know. But the little girl just stood there, her pale hand illuminated, turning it this way and that as if examining it. See, Serafina said. It doesn't hurt. Not anymore. Father said we're different. We don't have to hide like they do. Natalie's mouth had gone dry. Like who does? Lucian and Serafina exchanged a look. Then Lucian sighed. You really don't know what we are, do you? I've been here less than 24 hours, Natalie said. Why don't you enlighten me? We're vampires, Serafina announced, as casually as if she'd said they were from Boston. The whole household is. Well, except for the day staff. They're human like you. But everyone who lives here, everyone in the family were vampires. The word hung in the air. Natalie waited for the punchline, for someone to jump out and yell that this was an elaborate prank. But the children just watched her, waiting for her reaction. Natalie tried to organize her thoughts. That's not possible. It's very possible, Lucian said patiently. We're Dampiers, actually, half vampire. Our mother was human. That's why we can tolerate sunlight, though it's still not comfortable. Pure blood vampires like Father and Mrs. Kovar and the rest of the household, they can't. Sunlight would kill them in minutes. This was insane. This was absolutely insane. But even as Natalie's rational mind rejected it, pieces started clicking into place. The rules about being inside before sunrise, the separate meals, those red eyes, that metallic smell blood, she realized with a chill. The smell was blood. You don't believe us, Serafina said, sounding almost disappointed. I don't know what I believe. Natalie sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Vampires aren't real. We're standing right here, Lucian pointed out reasonably. This could all be, I don't know, contacts and pale makeup and some kind of weird role play. Watch. Serafina opened her mouth wide, and Natalie saw her canines elongate, growing into sharp fangs right before her eyes. They retracted a moment later. See? Natalie's hands were shaking. Oh, God. Don't panic, Lucian said quickly. He moved closer, his movements careful, like someone approaching a spooked animal. We won't hurt you. We don't drink from humans without permission, and we never take from the staff. Father has strict rules about that. We have suppliers, blood banks, donors who consent. It's all very civilized. Civilized, Natalie repeated weakly. Right, civilized vampires. Father is the king of the Eastern bloodline, Serafina said proudly. He rules over all the vampire families from here to the coast. We're very important. So when he said, Your Majesty, that was right. Real, Lucian finished. Very real. This isn't a game, Miss Everton. Vampires exist. We live in secret, hidden within human society, following ancient laws and traditions. And Father brought us here, away from the vampire court, because he wanted us to have a somewhat normal childhood, or as normal as possible for Dampiers. Natalie pressed her palms against her eyes. This was too much. Vampires, actual vampires. She'd walked into a house full of vampires, and she'd slept here, and she'd stood in a room with their king, and You're not going to run, Serafina observed. Natalie lowered her hands. What? You're scared, but you're not going to run. Why? That was a good question. Why wasn't she running? Because vampires were supposed to be monsters, creatures of horror movies and gothic novels. But these children, despite their fangs and their 2 old eyes, seemed more sad than scary. And Dravimir, for all his intensity, hadn't hurt her, had actually offered her safety. Because I don't have anywhere else to go, Natalie admitted. And because you need help. Both of you. I can see it. Lucian's expression softened. The other governesses, they either didn't believe us or they were too frightened once they learned the truth. But we need someone who can teach us about the human world, about how to exist in both worlds. Father tries, but he's been vampire for over 300 years. He doesn't remember what it's like to be human. 300 years. Natalie's head spun. If I stay, she said slowly, if I actually do this insane thing, I need the truth. All of it. No more surprises. Deal, Serafina said immediately. She stuck out her small hand. Do humans still shake on things? Despite everything, Natalie laughed. It was either that or scream. She reached out and shook Serafina's hand and then Lucien's. Their skin was cool to the touch, not cold exactly, but several degrees below normal human temperature. All right, she said. I guess we should start with those lessons Mrs. Kovar mentioned. The morning passed in a blur. Natalie discovered that both children were wickedly intelligent. Lucian had already mastered calculus, and Serafina could read in 4 languages, but they'd been neglected emotionally. No one had played with them, really talked to them, treated them like children rather than small adults or potential monsters. By lunchtime, she'd gotten them both laughing over her terrible attempt at pronouncing French, and Serafina had actually hugged her. They ate in the kitchen with the rest of the day staff, a cook named Margaret, 2 maids, and a groundskeeper. All human, all clearly aware of what the family was, all seemingly unbothered by it. Margaret explained that she'd worked for vampire households for 30 years. They're better employers than most humans, she said cheerfully, ladling soup into bowls. Respectful, pay well, and they don't bother you if you follow the rules. Does it ever feel strange? Natalie asked, working for them? Not anymore. Margaret set a bowl in front of each child. Natalie noticed it was regular soup, normal food. The children ate with good appetite, another sign of their half-human nature. At first, maybe. But monsters are what you make of them, dear. I've met humans who were far worse than any vampire I've served. That night, after the children were settled in their rooms with their curtains drawn against the approaching sunrise because vampires were nocturnal, she'd learned. Sleeping during the day and active at night, Natalie found herself wandering the manor's hallways. She'd meant to go back to her room, but the place was like a labyrinth, and she got turned around somewhere between the library and what might have been a ballroom. She ended up in a portrait gallery. Dozens of paintings lined the walls, all clearly very old, and in most of them she recognized Dravimir. The same white hair, the same aristocratic features, though his clothing changed with the centuries. Here he was in medieval armor, there in Renaissance finery, there in Victorian formal wear, always the same face, ageless, eternal. Can't sleep? Natalie spun around. Dravimir stood at the entrance to the gallery, dressed more casually than she'd seen him before, dark pants and a loose white shirt, feet bare. Without the formal clothing, he looked younger somehow, though calling someone who was 300 years old young seemed absurd. I got lost, she admitted. This place is enormous. It can be disorienting at first. He moved into the gallery, his footsteps silent on the marble floor. You didn't leave. The children told me the truth. I assumed they would. Dravimir stopped beside her, looking up at one of the portraits. Lucian, especially. He can't help himself. He believes in honesty. You were going to let me figure it out on my own? I was curious to see how long it would take. His red eyes slid to her. And how you would react. 6 governesses before you. 3 refused to believe, thought the children were disturbed or playing games. They didn't last the day. 2 believed and fled in terror. 1 believed and tried to stake me in my sleep. Natalie's eyebrows rose. What happened to her? I fired her. A hint of amusement touched his voice, and called her a cab. She was only 20, terrified, raised on horror movies. I didn't have the heart to do anything worse. That's surprisingly merciful for a vampire king. I've lived a long time, Miss Everton. I've learned that cruelty is almost always unnecessary. He turned to face her fully. The question now is what you intend to do. Will you stay? She should say no. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run, but she thought of Lucian's careful control, of Serafina's desperate need for connection, of the way both children had looked at her like she might actually be the one who stayed. I'll stay, she said, but I have conditions. His eyes gleamed with something that might have been respect. Name them. First, no one drinks from me, ever. I don't care if it's consensual or not. I'm not comfortable with it. Agreed. No one in this household will touch you without your explicit permission. Second, I need to know the rules, the real rules, not just the safety guidelines. If I'm living in a vampire household, I need to understand how this world works. I'll have Lucian provide you with the relevant texts, our histories, our laws. Consider it part of your education. And third, she hesitated. Marcus, my ex, if he somehow finds this place, if he shows up at those gates, he won't get through them. Dravimir's voice dropped into something cold and dangerous. I protect what is mine, Miss Everton. You are under my roof, which makes you my responsibility. If this Marcus is foolish enough to come here, he will be dealt with. The possessiveness in his tone should have alarmed her. Instead, she felt a strange flutter in her chest. When was the last time anyone had protected her? When had she ever been able to rely on someone else's strength instead of her own? Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Dravimir's expression softened slightly. This life, this world, it's not easy. You'll see things that will disturb you. You'll learn truths about the darkness that exists just beneath the surface of your human world, and you'll have to decide again and again whether you can accept it. What if I can't? Then you leave, and I'll ensure you have the resources to start fresh somewhere safe. He paused. But I don't think you will. There's something in you, Miss Everton. A strength, a resilience. I saw it last night, when you stood in my study soaking wet and desperate but still lifted your chin and met my eyes. You're a survivor. So are you, she said. 300 years of surviving. That must take incredible strength. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. It takes something, he agreed. Though I'm not always certain strength is the word I'd choose. Come. I'll walk you back to your quarters. You need rest. The children will test you again tomorrow. He led her through the halls with easy familiarity, pointing out landmarks so she wouldn't get lost again. The library, the music room, the conservatory. As they walked, she found herself stealing glances at him. In the candlelight, his features seemed softer, more human. She could almost forget what he was. Almost. Why did their mother die? The question slipped out before she could stop it. If she was married to a vampire king, didn't she have protection? Dravimir's jaw tightened. She did. But not all dangers come from outside. Katerina was human, but she was also brilliant, curious. She wanted to become vampire, to live alongside me forever. I refused. The transformation is agonizing, and many don't survive it. I couldn't risk losing her. He stopped outside Natalie's door. So she tried to do it herself, found a rogue vampire, someone desperate and hungry and willing to attempt it for the right price. The transformation went wrong. She died in agony, and I couldn't save her. The grief in his voice was raw despite the years. I'm sorry, Natalie whispered. So am I. He met her eyes. Which is why I've kept the children here, away from the court, away from the politics and dangers of our world. They're half human. They deserve a chance at a human life, or at least the choice of one. But they need guidance, someone who understands humanity in a way I no longer can. That's why we need you. The weight of that responsibility settled over her. I'll do my best. I know you will. For just a moment, his hand lifted as if he might touch her cheek, but he stopped himself. Good night, Miss Everton. Natalie, she said impulsively. You can call me Natalie. A small smile curved his lips, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. It transformed his face, making him look less like a marble statue and more like a man. Then you may call me Dravimir. Good night, Natalie. She watched him disappear into the shadows of the hallway, silent as smoke. Only then did she realize her heart was racing, and it had nothing to do with fear. The days blurred into a routine that would have seemed impossible a week ago. Natalie woke at sunset when the household came alive. She breakfasted with the children, taught them mathematics and literature and history. They taught her about vampire politics, blood bonds, and the complex hierarchy of the immortal world. Serafina showed her how to move silently, a skill she'd inherited from her father. Lucian taught her phrases in languages dead for centuries. In the afternoons, they played in the gardens. The children could go out in sunlight, though they wore protective clothing and stayed in the shade as much as possible. Natalie learned that their vampire heritage made them sensitive, uncomfortable in direct sun, even if it couldn't kill them like it would their father. Dragomir she almost never saw during the day. He slept, like all pure-blood vampires, in rooms deep within the manor where no sunlight could penetrate. But at night, after the children were abed, he would appear. Sometimes in the library, reading by candlelight, sometimes in his study, managing the complex business of ruling a vampire bloodline, and increasingly in whatever room Natalie happened to be in. They would talk about everything and nothing. He told her stories of the centuries he'd lived, of the rise and fall of empires, of humanity's endless capacity for both beauty and horror. She told him about growing up in a small town, losing her mother to cancer, fighting her way through college. He listened like her words were precious, like her small human life mattered as much as his epic immortal one. She shouldn't have been attracted to him. He was a vampire, a predator, something fundamentally inhuman. But she was. God help her, she was. It was there in the way her breath caught when he entered a room, in the way her skin tingled when he stood too close, in the way she found herself wanting to smooth the worry from his brow when he spoke about the children's future, and she thought perhaps that he felt it too. She caught him watching her sometimes, his red eyes tracking her movements with an intensity that made her feel both exposed and cherished. Once, their hands had brushed reaching for the same book, and he'd pulled back like she'd burned him. "I'm sorry," he'd said roughly. "I shouldn't. I need to maintain appropriate distance." "Why?" The question had escaped before she could censor it. "Because you're human. Because you're in my employ. Because you're young enough to be my—" He'd stopped, laughed bitterly. "My great-great-great-great-granddaughter. If I'd had children as a human. This fascination I feel, it's inappropriate on every level." Fascination? He'd looked at her then, really looked at her, and the hunger in his eyes had nothing to do with blood. "You must know. You must see it. The way I find excuses to be near you. The way I've rearranged my schedule to ensure our paths cross. I haven't felt this way since—" He'd stopped again, shaking his head. "It doesn't matter. Nothing can come of it." But something was coming of it. It grew between them like a living thing, this impossible attraction, and it terrified her as much as it thrilled her. 3 weeks after her arrival, everything changed. Natalie was in the garden with the children, laughing as Serafina attempted to teach her a vampire waltz when Mrs. Kovar appeared on the terrace. Her face was grim. "Miss Everton, you need to come inside, now." The tone made Natalie's blood freeze. "What's wrong?" "Your ex-boyfriend is at the gates." The world tilted. "What? How did he—" "I don't know, but he's there. He's demanding to see you, claiming you were kidnapped. He has police with him." Police? God, what had Marcus told them? What lies had he spun? She ran for the house, Mrs. Kovar and the children at her heels, through the corridors, down to the entrance hall where Dragomir stood by the windows, looking out toward the distant gates. He'd clearly just woken. His hair was loose, his shirt partially unbuttoned, but his expression was pure ice. "He brought authorities," Dragomir said without turning. "Clever. He knew I wouldn't simply make him disappear with witnesses present." "I have to go," Natalie said. Her hands were shaking. "I have to talk to them, explain—" "No." Dragomir turned to face her. "You'll stay here. I'll handle this. They won't just leave because you tell them to. If I don't go out there, they'll think Marcus is right, that I'm being held against my will." "They'll think whatever I want them to think." His eyes gleamed red. "I can compel them, make them forget they ever came here." Compulsion, mind control. She'd read about it in the text Lucian had given her. "But that would you'd be using your power on police officers. That's a violation of vampire law, isn't it? You said your people live in secret, never draw attention. There are exceptions when one's household is threatened. Dravomir moved toward her, his face softening slightly. Natalie, I gave you my word. No one will take you from here unless you wish to go. Not him, not the human authorities, not anyone. Father, let her speak to them, Lucian said quietly. The boy had entered so silently that Natalie hadn't heard him. She's not property to be defended. She should have a choice. Dravomir's jaw clenched, but he nodded curtly. Very well, but I'm coming with you. In sunlight? Natalie looked at the windows, at the afternoon sun streaming through. You can't. I can for brief periods. It will hurt, but I can endure it. His hand found hers, cool and steady. I won't let you face him alone. They took a car down the long drive, Dravomir in the back seat where the tinted windows offered some protection. Even so, Natalie could see the tension in his body, the way his skin reddened slightly where sunlight touched it. It had to hurt. He was doing this for her, enduring pain for her. The gates came into view, and her stomach dropped. Marcus stood there, looking exactly as she remembered handsome in that clean-cut way, his suit probably expensive, his smile perfect for the two police officers beside him. He'd always known how to present himself, how to seem reasonable and concerned while hiding the control freak beneath. The car stopped. Dravomir got out first, his movements fluid despite the sunlight. He positioned himself slightly in front of Natalie, protective even now. Marcus's eyes narrowed when he saw him. Natalie, Marcus called out, his voice dripping with false relief. Thank God, I've been so worried. Mr. Everton, one of the officers said. He was older, gray-haired, with a no-nonsense expression. I'm Officer Chen. We received a report that you were missing, possibly taken against your will. Are you all right? I'm fine, Natalie said firmly. I'm here by choice. I took a job, and I didn't tell Marcus because we're broken up. He has a restraining order against him for harassment. That order was dismissed, Marcus said quickly. A misunderstanding. Natalie, please, we can work this out. You don't need to hide with... His gaze raked over Dravomir with barely concealed disgust. Strangers. Come home with me. She is home, Dravomir said quietly. The words resonated with something deeper, something almost ceremonial. She is a member of my household, under my protection. She owes you nothing, least of all an explanation. And who exactly are you? The second officer asked. She was younger, her hand resting on her belt near her weapon. Dravomir Thornveil. I own this estate. Miss Everton is employed here as a governess. As she said, she came of her own free will and remains of her own free will. Officer Chen looked between them, clearly trying to assess the situation. Miss Everton, is this true? No one is forcing you to stay? No one is forcing me, Natalie confirmed. Marcus is my ex. He's been stalking me for months. I left the city to get away from him, and I'm asking you to make him leave now. You heard her, Officer Chen said to Marcus. If there's a restraining order... It was dismissed. Marcus's perfect facade cracked slightly. Natalie, stop this. You can't just disappear, worry everyone who cares about you. The only person worried was you, Natalie shot back. My friends know where I am. My aunt knows where I am. The only person I didn't tell was you, because you don't get to know anymore. We're done. Natalie. She asked you to leave. Dravomir's voice dropped into something cold and dangerous. He took one step forward, and despite the sunlight clearly causing him pain, his presence was overwhelming. I suggest you comply. For a moment, Natalie thought Marcus might actually try something, his hands clenched into fists, his face flushing with anger. But then his gaze met Dravomir's, and something passed between them, some recognition of the predator lurking beneath Dravomir's civilized exterior. Marcus took a step back. This isn't over, he said. Oh, I think it is. Dravomir's smile showed just a hint of fang. If you come near her again, if you so much as drive past these gates, I will ensure you regret it. Do we understand each other? It was a threat, an open or blatant threat made in front of police officers, but Dravomir delivered it with such absolute certainty that even the officers seemed to feel the weight of it. They shifted uncomfortably, suddenly eager to be anywhere else. Sir, Officer Chen said carefully, threatening behavior. Is exactly what Mr. Everton here has engaged in for months, Dravomir interrupted smoothly. which is why Miss Everton obtained a restraining order. Perhaps you should escort him away from private property before I'm forced to call my lawyers regarding harassment and trespassing." The officers exchanged glances. Then Officer Chen nodded. "Mr. Everton, I think it's time you left. Miss Everton has made her position clear." Marcus looked like he wanted to argue, but even he wasn't stupid enough to push further. He got into his car, shooting one last venomous look at Natalie before driving away. The police followed, and then it was just Natalie and Dravomir standing in the sun-drenched drive. She turned to him and saw the damage. His exposed skin was red, blistering in places. His jaw was clenched against obvious pain. And yet, he'd stood there, endured it, for her. "Get back in the car," she said urgently. "You're hurt. It will heal." But he let her guide him back into the vehicle, into the shade. As the driver took them back to the manor, Natalie examined his hands, his face. The burns were already fading, his vampire healing kicking in. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "You could have let me go alone." "No," Dravomir said simply. "I couldn't." His eyes met hers, and the intensity there stole her breath. "I told you. I protect what is mine. I'm not yours. Aren't you?" His hand came up, cupping her face with infinite gentleness. His skin was still too warm from the sun exposure, almost feverish. "I think you became mine the moment you walked through those gates, and I think I became yours, though I fought against it. Tell me I'm wrong." She couldn't. God help her, she couldn't. "This is insane," she breathed. "You're a vampire. I'm human. It can't work." "It can if we want it to." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I've lived 3 centuries, Natalie. I've known thousands of people, human and vampire alike, and none of them have made me feel what you make me feel. None of them have made me willing to walk into sunlight." "What do I make you feel?" "Alive." The word was rough, torn from somewhere deep. "For the first time in longer than I can remember, I feel alive." The car stopped at the manor. They should have pulled apart, should have maintained the professional distance they'd been fighting to preserve. Instead, Natalie leaned forward, closing the space between them, and kissed him. His lips were cool against hers, soft and firm at once. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then he made a low sound in his throat and kissed her back, one hand sliding into her hair while the other pulled her closer. He tasted like winter nights and dark wine and something indefinably other. The kiss deepened, turned desperate, 3 weeks of tension exploding between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Dravomir rested his forehead against hers. "This complicates things. I know. The children will be confused. Lucian already knows. He's 10 going on 100. He probably knew before we did." A huff of laughter. "Probably." Dravomir pulled back slightly, his red eyes searching her face. "I need you to be certain. This world, my world, it's dangerous. There are vampires who would see you as a weakness to exploit. There are laws and traditions and politics that you can't even imagine yet. If we do this, if we become something to each other, I can protect you from most of it. But not all of it." "I'm certain," Natalie said, terrified, but certain. "Good." He kissed her again, softer this time. "Because I don't think I could let you go now, even if you asked." They told the children that evening. Lucian took the news with his usual calm, merely nodding as if confirming something he'd already concluded. Serafina shrieked with delight and immediately started planning their wedding, which made both Natalie and Dravomir laugh. "It's not we're not, it's very new," Natalie tried to explain. "But you love him," Serafina said with the blunt certainty of a child. "I can tell, and he loves you. So you'll get married and you'll stay forever." Would she? The thought should have terrified her more than it did. But looking at these children who needed her, at the man who'd walked into sunlight for her, she thought maybe forever didn't sound so bad. The next weeks were a revelation. Falling in love with Dravomir was like learning to breathe underwater, strange and terrifying and absolutely necessary. He courted her with old-world formality, bringing her flowers that bloomed at midnight, playing centuries-old love songs on the piano, reading her poetry in languages she didn't understand but felt in her bones. He was gentle with her, always conscious of his strength, his otherness. The first time she cut her finger on a piece of broken glass, he'd gone completely still. his eyes fixed on the small bead of blood. She'd seen the struggle in him, the vampire instinct warring with his iron control. "I should go," he'd said roughly. "Don't." She'd stepped closer, trusting him absolutely. "You won't hurt me. You don't know that. The scent of your blood, he'd closed his eyes. "Intoxicating. But you're not going to attack me. I know you're not." She'd taken his hand, pressed it against her chest where her heart beat steady and sure. "I trust you." He'd opened his eyes then, and they were bright red, fully vampire. But his hand on her chest was steady, reverent. "You shouldn't." Too late. He'd kissed her then, careful and controlled, and she'd tasted the effort it took him to maintain that control. Later, he'd explained the blood bond to her, how vampires could form deep connections with humans through the exchange of blood, how it would strengthen her, extend her life, tie them together in ways that transcended the physical. "I won't ask it of you," he'd said. "That choice must be entirely yours, without pressure or expectation." But she'd thought about it. In the quiet moments, she'd thought about what it would mean to bind herself to him, to step fully into his world. It should have horrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. 2 months after her arrival, everything changed again. Natalie was in the library with Lucian, helping him research human history for a project, when Mrs. Cover appeared in the doorway. Her face was pale, her usual composure shaken. "Miss Everton, His Majesty requires you in his study immediately. And Master Lucien, Lady Seraphina, you should come as well." The formal tone, the use of titles, something was very wrong. They followed Mrs. Cover through the halls, and Natalie's stomach knotted with dread. When they entered the study, Dravomir stood by the window with 3 other vampires she'd never seen before. They were all impossibly beautiful, all bearing that same pale, ageless quality. 2 men and a woman, dressed in formal attire that seemed both modern and timeless. Their eyes tracked Natalie's entrance with predatory focus. "Dravomir," the woman said, her voice like silk over steel. "This is the human?" "Lady Morgana." Dravomir's tone was carefully neutral. "May I present Natalie Everton, governess to my children. Natalie, Lady Morgana of the Northern Bloodline, Lord Vasile, and Lord Corvain of the Western Bloodline." The formality was a warning. Natalie dropped into a curtsy she'd learned from watching the children, keeping her eyes lowered. "My lords, my lady." "She has manners at least," Vasile drawled. He was the youngest looking of the 3, with sharp features and eyes like chips of amber. "Though I'm curious why we're being introduced to a servant." "Because she's more than that," Dravomir said quietly. "As you well know, or you wouldn't be here." "Word has spread, old friend." Corvain was older, gray streaking his dark hair, his eyes a deep crimson. "Rumor says the king of the Eastern Bloodline has taken a human lover, that he keeps her in his household, allows his Dhampir children to become attached to her. Some are concerned." Natalie's blood ran cold. She felt Dravomir's hand find hers, his grip tight. "My private life is not the concern of the council," Dravomir said. "It is when it threatens the secrecy we all depend on." Morgana moved closer, circling Natalie like a predator assessing prey. "Humans are fragile, emotional. They make mistakes. A human who knows our secrets, who lives among us, what happens when she tires of this life? When the novelty wears off? Will she keep our secrets, or will she run to her human authorities with tales of monsters?" "She wouldn't," Seraphina started. "Quiet, child," Vasile snapped. "This is adult business." Dravomir's eyes flashed. "You will not speak to my daughter that way." "Your daughter who is half human," Morgana pointed out, "like this woman's potential children would be. You're diluting our bloodlines, Dravomir. It's one thing to have Dhampir offspring from a legal binding, but a human lover, a human governess with no formal ties, it's unseemly." "What exactly are you proposing?" Dravomir's voice had gone dangerously quiet. "That you do what needs to be done." Corvain's eyes settled on Natalie with something almost like pity. "Either bind her properly, turn her, make her one of us through blood bond and transformation, or remove her from your household. Those are the only acceptable options." The room spun. Transformation. They were talking about making her a vampire, about fundamentally changing what she was, or else throwing her out. "She doesn't want that," Dravomir said. "We've discussed it. The choice is hers, and she hasn't made it." "Then the choice is made for her." Morgana's tone was final. The council convenes in 3 days. You'll present your decision then. Either she becomes vampire, or she leaves and her memory of this world is erased. We cannot risk exposure." They left in a swirl of expensive fabric and cold finality. The moment they were gone, Serafina burst into tears. Lucian went to her, wrapping his arms around his sister while his young face was set in grim lines. "They can't make her leave," Serafina sobbed. "Father, tell them they can't—" "Hush, little one." Dravomir crossed to his children, gathering them both close, but his eyes were on Natalie, full of helpless rage. "It will be all right." But it wouldn't be. Natalie could see that clearly. The Vampire Council had spoken. Either she underwent an agonizing, potentially fatal process that would strip away her humanity, or she left, and everything she'd experienced here would be erased from her memory like it had never happened. She wouldn't remember the children, wouldn't remember falling in love with Dravomir, wouldn't remember any of it. Both options felt like death. That night, after the children finally cried themselves to sleep, Natalie found Dravomir in the garden. He stood among the night-blooming flowers, his white hair almost luminous in the moonlight. He looked ancient suddenly, weighed down by centuries. "I'm sorry," he said without turning. "I should have been more careful, should have anticipated that the council would hear rumors. I've put you in an impossible position." "You didn't do this," Natalie said. She moved to stand beside him. They did. They and their archaic rules. Rules that exist for a reason. Secrecy has kept our people safe for millennia. One human who knows too much, who might expose us, I understand their fear even if I hate it. So what do we do? I don't know. The admission seemed torn from him. If I defy the council, I risk war between the bloodlines. Hundreds, maybe thousands would die. But if I let them take you, if I let them erase you— His hands clenched. I don't think I could survive that. Natalie took his hand, bringing it to her lips. Then tell me about transformation. Really tell me, not the sanitized version. I need to know everything. He looked at her, and she saw fear in his ancient eyes. It's agony, Natalie. The vampire venom rewriting your cells, killing your humanity and rebuilding you is something other. It takes 3 days, and every moment feels like burning alive from the inside. Some don't survive, their hearts give out, or their minds break. And if you do survive— He cupped her face. You'll be changed, not just physically. Your emotions, your thoughts, your very soul, it all shifts. You'll crave blood. You'll be tied to the night forever. You'll watch everyone you ever knew as a human age and die while you remain frozen. Is that truly what you want? I don't know, she admitted. But I know I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you, or the children, or even this strange world I've become part of. Maybe that makes me selfish. It makes you human. He kissed her softly. You have 3 days to decide. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. If you want to walk away, I'll make sure you're protected, set up somewhere safe with everything you need. And if you want to transform— His voice caught. I'll be with you every moment. I won't let you face it alone. 3 days. 72 hours to choose between remaining human and losing everything, or becoming something other and keeping it. How was anyone supposed to make that choice? She spent the next 2 days in a daze. The children clung to her, Serafina especially. Lucian, in his quiet way, brought her books about transformation, accounts from vampires who'd chosen it. Some found transcendence, others found only loss. On the second night, Mrs. Cover found her in the library. You should know, the older vampire said, sitting across from her, that I was human once. 300 years ago, I was a governess much like you. I fell in love with a vampire lord, and I chose transformation to be with him. Natalie looked up sharply. What happened? He died in the bloodline wars 50 years later, and I've lived 2.5 centuries without him, watching the world change, serving different households, existing but not truly living. Mrs. Kovar's pale eyes held hers. I don't regret the choice. I had 50 years of joy with him, and that was worth the centuries of loneliness, but I want you to understand the reality. Immortality sounds beautiful until you've lived it. Why are you telling me this? Because you need to choose with your eyes open. Mrs. Kovar stood. His Majesty loves you. I've never seen him like this, not even with Katerina. But love isn't always enough to sustain you through eternity. Make sure you understand what you're choosing. The third day arrived too quickly. Natalie woke before sunset, her decision still unmade. She dressed carefully in one of the gowns Dravomir had given her, deep blue silk that made her feel beautiful and brave. Then she went to the children's rooms. Serafina was already awake, sitting by her window and crying quietly. Natalie gathered the little girl into her arms. "I don't want you to go," Serafina whispered. "Please don't go." "I'm not going anywhere," Natalie said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. "I'm staying, Sarah. I'm staying." "You're going to transform." "Yes. It will hurt," Serafina said, her voice very small. "I remember when Mama tried. I remember her screaming." Natalie's heart clenched. "I know, but I'm strong, and I have your father with me. I'll be all right." She hoped she wasn't lying. Lucian was waiting in the hallway. He looked at her with those two old eyes and nodded once. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for choosing us." "Always," Natalie promised. The council convened at sunset. Dravomir brought Natalie to the formal meeting hall, a room she'd never entered before. It was enormous, with a vaulted ceiling and stained glass windows depicting vampire history. The council members sat in high-backed chairs arranged in a semicircle. Morgana, Vasile, Corvain, and 4 others Natalie didn't recognize. All ancient, all powerful, all watching her with expressionless faces. "Lord Dravomir," Morgana intoned, "you were given 3 days to decide the human's fate. What is your decision?" "The decision is mine," Natalie said before Dravomir could speak. She stepped forward, lifting her chin. "Not his. I choose transformation." A murmur ran through the council. Morgana's eyebrows rose. "You understand what you're agreeing to? The pain, the risk." "I understand perfectly." Natalie's voice didn't waver. "I've spent 3 days reading accounts, talking to those who've survived it. I know the odds. I know what I'll lose and what I'll gain, and I choose it. I choose this life, this world, this family." "Bold," Vasile murmured. "Perhaps too bold. Humans who seek immortality often do so for the wrong reasons." "I'm not seeking immortality," Natalie shot back. "I'm seeking the people I love, the children who need me, the man who walked into sunlight to protect me. If being with them means becoming vampire, then that's what I'll do." Silence. Then Corvain spoke, his ancient eyes studying her. "There is steel in this one. Very well. The council approves the transformation. Lord Dravomir, you will oversee the process personally. If she survives, she'll be welcomed into the Eastern bloodline with full rights and protections. If she doesn't," his gaze flicked to Dravomir, "the loss will be yours to bear." It was done. The council filed out, leaving Natalie and Dravomir alone in the enormous hall. He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You didn't have to do this," he said roughly. "We could have fought them, found another way. This is the way I want." She pulled back to look at him. "I love you. I love the children. I want forever with you, if forever is what we get. I'm not afraid." "You should be." "I am." "Then be afraid with me." She kissed him. "When do we start?" "Tonight," Dravomir said. "There's no point in delaying. The longer we wait, the harder it becomes." He took her to his chambers rooms she'd never entered before. They were surprisingly simple, dominated by an enormous bed with dark curtains that could block out any light. He explained the process as he prepared her, his voice clinical, even though she could see the fear in his eyes. "I'll drain you to the edge of death. Then you'll drink from me, enough for the venom to take hold. Then it's 3 days of waiting while your body fights to survive the change. I'll be with you the entire time. I'll make sure you're as comfortable as possible." "But Natalie," he cupped her face, "there's no shame in changing your mind. Even now I'm not changing my mind." "Then lie down." She did, her heart hammering. Dravomir settled beside her, his cool hand stroking her hair back from her neck. "I love you," he said. "Whatever happens, know that I love you." "I love you too." His fangs pierced her throat, and the world exploded into sensation. There was pain, but also something else, a dark pleasure that made her gasp. She felt her blood leaving her, felt her strength draining away. The room began to darken at the edges. Her heartbeat slowed, weakened. She was dying, actually dying. Then Dravomir's wrist was at her mouth, blood welling from a cut he'd made. "Drink," he commanded. She did. His blood was strange on her tongue, cold, thick, tasting of iron and night and ancient power. She swallowed, and it burned going down, burned like acid. More. She needed more. She drank deeper and felt something shift inside her, something fundamental breaking and reforming. "Enough," Dravomir said, pulling his wrist away even as she tried to follow it. "Too much will kill you." The burning intensified. It spread from her throat to her chest, to her limbs, to every cell in her body. She tried to scream but couldn't get enough air. Her back arched off the bed as agony consumed her. "I'm here," Dravomir said, gathering her against him. "I'm here, beloved. I won't leave you." The pain was everything. It was being torn apart and remade, dying and being reborn, burning in hellfire while ice froze her veins. Time lost meaning. She was aware of Dravomir's arms around her, of his voice speaking to her in languages both ancient and modern, aware of cool cloths on her burning skin, of water dripped between her lips, aware of screaming, of begging for it to stop, for death, for anything but this endless agony. And then, slowly, it began to change. The pain was still there, but beneath it she felt something new. Strength flooding into her limbs, her senses sharpening until she could hear every sound in the manor, could smell individual scents, blood, stone, old wood, Dravomir's unique scent. Her vision cleared, and colors became more vivid than she'd ever imagined. On the third day, the pain finally receded. She opened her eyes, her new eyes, and saw the world in perfect clarity. Dravomir sat beside her, looking haggard and terrified and hopeful all at once. "Natalie?" His voice was careful. "Can you hear me?" "Yes." Her voice sounded different, clearer, with an almost musical quality. "I can hear everything." Relief flooded his face. He pulled her into his arms, and she felt the tremor in his hands. "You survived. God, you survived. I told you I would." She pulled back, looking at her hands. Her skin was paler now, with a slight luminous quality. When she focused, she could feel the venom still working through her, completing the transformation. "How do I look?" "Beautiful." He kissed her softly. "You've always been beautiful, but now you're ethereal. Perfect. I feel strange. Different. But also," she searched for the word, "more. Like I've been living in a dimmed world and someone finally turned up the lights. That will intensify over the coming days as you fully transition. Come. The children have been waiting anxiously. They need to see that you're all right." She stood, and the motion was effortless in a way it had never been before. No fatigue, no weakness, just fluid grace. She followed Dravomir through the halls, and everywhere she looked there were new details she'd never noticed: the grain in the wood, the threads in the carpets, the subtle shifts in air current. Serafina and Lucian waited in the nursery. The moment they saw her, Serafina burst into tears and ran to her. Natalie caught the little girl easily, her new strength making the child seem light as air. "You're alive," Serafina sobbed. "You're really alive." "I'm alive," Natalie confirmed. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Lucian approached more cautiously. "How do you feel?" "Different, but still me." She met his eyes, saw her own reflection in them. Her eyes were still their natural brown, not red like Dravomir's, but there was a subtle glow to them now. "I'm still your governess. I'm still going to make you practice your mathematics and your French." He smiled then, really smiled. "Welcome to the family, Natalie." The next weeks were an adjustment. Natalie had to learn to control her new strength, to manage her heightened senses, to navigate the complex hunger for blood. Dravomir was patient, teaching her everything she needed to know. He introduced her to ethical donors, humans who willingly provided blood in exchange for vampire protection. He showed her how to hunt without killing, how to take only what she needed. The sun became her enemy. Even brief exposure caused burns and weakness. She learned to sleep during the day like the rest of the household, waking at sunset to a world of darkness and stars. But she also learned the joys of her new existence. She could keep up with Serafina now when they played, could match the little girl's supernatural speed and strength. She could read the ancient texts Lucian loved, could see in total darkness, could hear music in ways she'd never imagined. And with Dravomir, everything became more. Every touch was magnified, every kiss electric. They could be together without him fearing his strength would hurt her. They could share blood, the intimate act creating a bond between them that went deeper than words. 3 months after her transformation, Dravomir proposed. It was simple, private, just the two of them in the garden at midnight, surrounded by night-blooming flowers. "I've lived 300 years," he said, taking her hand. "I've had lovers, companions, even a wife, but I've never felt what I feel with you. You make me want to be better, to build something lasting. Will you marry me? Will you be my queen in truth, not just in my heart?" "Yes," she said simply. 1,000 times yes. They were married a month later in the manor's chapel, with the children as witnesses and the household in attendance. Morgana and the council sent representatives formally acknowledging Natalie's place in vampire society. She was no longer human, no longer outsider. She was Natalie Thornveil, queen of the Eastern bloodline, wife to Dravomir and mother to his children. The years that followed were filled with joy and challenges both. Natalie learned to navigate vampire politics, to rule alongside Dravomir with grace and strength. She watched the children grow, Serafina becoming a beautiful, fierce young woman, Lucian becoming a wise and compassionate leader. She learned that Mrs. Cover was right, immortality was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. She watched human friends age and die. She saw the world change in ways both wonderful and heartbreaking. But through it all, she had Dravomir beside her, steady and eternal. 20 years after her transformation, she stood in the garden at midnight, much as she had on the night she'd accepted his proposal. Dravomir found her there, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Regrets?" he asked softly. "None," she said honestly. "I miss being human sometimes, miss the simplicity of it. But I wouldn't trade this life for anything. I wouldn't trade you." "Good." He kissed her temple. "Because you're stuck with me for eternity now. I can think of worse fates." Inside, she could hear the children, not children anymore, really, but they would always be children to her, arguing about something. She heard Serafina's laughter, bright and joyful, heard Lucian's patient correction. They were safe. They were happy. They were family. And that, Natalie thought, was worth every moment of agony, every sacrifice, every impossibility she'd faced. She'd walked through those gates running from danger, and she'd found home. She'd been mistaken for a governess, and she'd become a queen. But more than that, she'd become herself, fully, completely herself. And she'd found love in the last place she'd ever expected, in the arms of a vampire king who'd been waiting 3 centuries for her to arrive. "Come inside," Dravomir said, taking her hand. "Our family's waiting." Their family. There forever. Natalie let him lead her back into the warmth and light of Thornveil Manor, back into the life she'd chosen and the love she'd fought for. The gates that had once seemed like the jaws of a beast now stood guardian, protecting everything precious within. And as Natalie crossed the threshold with her husband beside her and her children's voices ringing through the halls, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Forever was a long time. But with Dravomir, with their children, with this impossible life she'd stumbled into, forever didn't seem nearly long enough. And in the end, that was everything.